Right after I raised Dad's flag for 9/11, the mailbox held a fine, pink slip, bold ink, and the smell of cold metal. Name's Michael Reeves, mid-50s, former engineer, now apparently a zoning violator. That old flag rope? Been in our family longer than the HOA. Ever had a rule make you question who it's really protecting? The early September sun cast golden light over Hollingsville as Franklin Reeves hoisted the American flag outside his porch, like he'd done every 9/11 since 1991. But this time, a pink slip was waiting in the mailbox. He didn't notice it right away. The crisp morning breeze carried the faint scent of roses as Franklin straightened the pole, checked the knot on the halyard, and let the flag unfurl with practiced reverence. At precisely 7:30 a.m., the stars and stripes caught the morning light, fluttering above the front yard like they always had. Only then did he turn toward the mailbox. A thin pink slip stuck out between bills and an old Rite Aid flyer. Franklin frowned. With a groan from his right knee, he reached in, pulled it out, and squinted. Notice of violation, Article 3.4, unauthorized structure height. His breath caught. Structure? They were talking about the flagpole? Half an hour later, Michael Reeves pulled up in his silver Ford Escape, balancing a pie on one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. He'd stopped by the Dutch pie truck, Franklin's favorite, and grabbed the last cinnamon apple before they packed up for the week. "Dad," he called, nudging the screen door open with his elbow. Franklin sat at the kitchen table, the slip beside his half-empty mug of coffee. His eyes lingered on it. "Good morning," Michael said slowly. "Brought pie." Franklin grunted. "They want me to take it down." Michael raised a brow, setting the pie on the counter. "The flag?" Franklin slid the notice over. Michael read it, blinking. "This is ridiculous. You've had that pole for decades. Apparently not within the approved height limit." "Never been a problem before," Franklin muttered. "But Marilyn's in charge now." Michael looked up. "Marilyn Grant?" "She got voted HOA president in August. First order of business, measure flagpoles, I guess." He tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Michael sighed and pulled out a chair. "Let me call them. Must be a mix-up." Later that morning, at the HOA office, a boxy building tucked between the post office and dry cleaner, Michael waited behind a potted ficus until Marilyn Grant appeared. Her blazer was a precise shade of beige, her nails coral pink. "I'm here about a violation my father received," he began. She barely glanced at the paper. "All flagpoles exceeding 10 feet are non-compliant under subsection 3.4. It's been in the bylaws since 2005. It's been up since before that. Grandfathered-in items require annual recertification. No record of his." Michael's jaw clenched. "He's a veteran. That flag's flown every 9/11 for 30 years. Marilyn smiled politely. "We respect his service, Mr. Reeves. But the rules are the rules." Back on Maple Street, Haley Tran crouched beside her garden bed, earbuds in and phone in hand. She watched Franklin across the street tending to his roses, his movements slower than she remembered. She tapped record. Old Sarge still raising the colors, she whispered into her mic, "Hollingsville HOA says it's too tall. Thoughts?" Within minutes, the video appeared in the Hollingsville Facebook group, captioned, "Too tall to honor 9/11? Comments rolled in fast. "He's a vet, leave him alone. Rules exist for a reason. Who the heck is Marilyn Grant? My uncle got fined for wind chimes last week, same nonsense." Michael scrolled through the comments that evening, sitting at his father's desk. He could feel the undercurrent of something deeper than a flag issue: resentment, power plays, the HOA flexing its muscles. "This isn't about code violations," he muttered. "It's control." He reached for the filing cabinet, searching for any paperwork that could help. Most drawers held gardening supplies, appliance manuals, and a crossword book from 2009. Then, behind a stack of photo albums, he spotted an old shoebox with a strip of duct tape across the top. He opened it. Inside were dog tags, an old campaign hat, a program from a memorial service, and a manila folder, thick with yellowing papers. VA correspondence, 1991 to 2010. Marilyn insisted the rules were non-negotiable. Michael found that the law didn't agree. It was mid-September, a Wednesday morning that smelled faintly of cut grass and engine oil. The VA clinic in Lancaster was busier than usual, with older men in baseball caps greeting each other like old comrades and younger vets tapping their feet in the waiting area, their eyes scanning the scrolling names on the overhead screen. Franklin sat near the window, holding his cane across his knees. His face was calm, but his grip on the handle was tight. Michael sat beside him, arms crossed. "You'd think they'd let it go after 30 years, he muttered. Franklin didn't reply. Across the room, a man in a wheelchair turned his head. "You talking about that flagpole thing in Hollingsville?" Michael looked up. "Yeah. My dad's been flying the flag every 9/11 since Desert Storm. Now the HOA wants it down." The man wheeled over, adjusting the leash attached to a yellow Labrador snoozing beside him. "Name's Don. Don Alvarez. VA liaison, unofficially. Whiskey here listens better than most people." He scratched the dog's ear. "Mind if I chime in?" Michael shook his hand. "Be my guest." Don nodded toward Franklin. "You serve?" "Vietnam. First Cav," Franklin replied. Don whistled. "Then you've earned more than some pink slip from a self-important HOA president. You get that in writing?" Michael pulled the violation notice from his folder. Don read it quickly, then chuckled dryly. "These people always overreach. But lucky for you, there's a federal layer they forget about." Later that afternoon, they met again at Rita's diner. Margot refilled mugs without asking, sliding over 2 slices of pecan pie on the house for the Colonel, as she called Franklin. Don had brought a battered binder, stuffed with sticky notes and clipped pages. "Some HOA presidents act like kings, until they meet a vet with paperwork," Don said, thumbing through it. "Here." He pointed to a page in the HUD Fair Housing Act. "Veterans with service-connected disabilities are protected under certain conditions. That includes patriotic displays if they're tied to service recognition." Michael leaned in. "So they can't make him take it down?" "They can try. But if it triggers discrimination under ADA or HUD, they're on thin ice. Especially if they've let other violations slide." He pulled another page, this one a photocopy of a court decision. "Here's a case from Arizona. HOA fined a vet over a decorative eagle plaque. Judge ruled in the vet's favor, citing symbolic speech." Franklin stirred his coffee. "That sounds good in theory. But these folks don't bend easy." "Then we don't ask nicely," Don said. "We document everything." That night, Michael was at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. He flipped through the HOA's newsletters, scanned QR codes leading to their meeting notes, and began listing inconsistencies. The playground fence behind the community center had never been approved by vote. The "Welcome to Hollingsville" sign was installed without zoning review. At least 2 landscaping contractors listed on HOA letters lacked proper licensing. Linda Vasquez stopped by with fresh rolls around 7. "I saw the Facebook thing. They've got no right," she said. "Marilyn's got too much time and too little grace." Michael smiled. "I'm working on it." The next morning, Franklin found another envelope taped to the porch railing. Michael opened it. "Final notice. $800 fine will be assessed in 10 days if the flagpole remains non-compliant." "Fast escalation," Michael muttered. "Guess she didn't like the Facebook buzz." They returned to Rita's. Don arrived with a manila envelope of his own. He laid out copies of the HOA's recent memos and compared them to archived meeting minutes downloaded from the town's website. "Look at this," Don said. In June, they voted to delay flagpole reviews until next year. But this memo here, sent in August, says enforcement is effective immediately. Michael's brow furrowed. They reversed course without a recorded vote. No motion, no quorum, no member notice, Don confirmed. That's an internal contradiction. Franklin sipped his coffee. Means they broke their own process. Means, Don said, folding the papers neatly, they're vulnerable. Outside, the air had grown cooler. Leaves along Main Street edged from green to gold, and townsfolk paused to chat about football standings and how coffee now cost more than a gallon of gas used to. Franklin watched as whiskey rested his head on Don's boot. Good dog, he said, softly. Don smiled. He's better than I deserve. Michael looked up from his notes. We may have something here. Don leaned in, voice low but steady. Want to know what happens when an HOA misclassifies property jurisdiction? They lose funding. Fast. By the end of September, the mailbox wasn't for letters, it was for threats. The air had turned brisk, and fallen leaves crunched under Franklin's boots as he walked back from the curb. He didn't bother with gloves, he needed to feel the paper, as if by touch he could tell whether it was another blow or just another bill. But the pale yellow envelope with the HOA seal left no doubt. He brought it inside without a word, setting it beside the last 3 notices. Michael looked up from the kitchen table where he was organizing paperwork in a growing accordion folder labeled Flagpole Evidence. Franklin unfolded the latest letter. Unauthorized ground disturbance, he read flatly. They mean the rose bed. Michael stared. That rose bed's been there for years. You even trimmed it back. They say it wasn't pre-approved. He gave a dry chuckle, no humor in it. Outside, the wind tugged at the flag, now a familiar symbol of resistance. Autumn had swept into Hollingsville. Lawns once green and cheerful now held a nervous hush. Neighbors waved less. Children biked quicker past Marilyn Grant's house. That afternoon, Haley Tran knocked on Michael's door with her camera bag slung over one shoulder and a tablet in hand. She glanced around before stepping inside. I've been filming, she said, pulling up a screen. Caught Marilyn inspecting 6 properties, front yards, back fences. No notice. No one home. She tapped to show drone footage, Marilyn with a clipboard, leaning over flower beds, measuring tape in hand. One clip showed her stepping across someone's private gate to snap a photo. She's building a case, Haley said. Michael exhaled slowly. Or intimidation. She fined the Ramirez family yesterday, Halloween pumpkins. Too early. Haley's tone was calm, but her eyes flashed. I'm compiling everything. Dates. Footage. Comments. People are scared to speak up, but they're talking. Across town, Tom Briggs shuffled into the HOA office, the bell above the door jingling. He'd always kept to himself, retired, quiet, content to tinker with engines in his garage. But this morning, a notice had arrived, mailbox height violation. His hadn't changed in 20 years. Marilyn, he said, voice gravelly. She looked up from behind her desk, hair pinned with not a strand out of place. This you're doing? I merely enforce the rules, Tom. You know that. No. I know you send letters to a man who served in Kuwait because his rosebush is too wide. You fined the Hendersons for paint color and now me for a mailbox I built myself. Marilyn folded her hands. There's a process. You're welcome to appeal. Tom leaned forward. You're not a judge. And this neighborhood isn't your court. She didn't respond. The printer hummed in the background, churning out another stack of warnings. That night at Rita's diner, the usual light clatter of cutlery was quieter than normal. Margot refilled Franklin's coffee without asking. Linda Vasquez leaned across the booth and whispered, "They find me for my wind chimes." Michael looked up. What? Said they disturbed community tranquility. Been up since 2008. Tom entered a few minutes later, his expression unreadable, but he nodded at Franklin. That small gesture, silent, firm, was the loudest vote of confidence yet. The town was splitting into hushed sides, those who feared Marilyn's wrath, and those starting to push back. Michael stayed up late that night, typing on his old laptop, surrounded by folders and legal books Dawn had lent him. He filed the formal grievance with a click, citing the Fair Housing Act, ADA protections, and case precedent from Dawn's battered binder. It wasn't just about Franklin anymore. This was about process, about pushing back on creeping tyranny disguised as neighborhood management. Near midnight, the door creaked. Michael tensed, then relaxed when he saw Franklin holding a mug of cocoa. "Can't sleep," Franklin said. "Feels like they're watching." Michael gave a tired smile. "They are. But we're watching back." They sat quietly for a while, the clock ticking. Later, as Michael headed to bed, he noticed something by the front door. Not in the mailbox, on the floor inside, slid under the threshold. He picked it up. An unmarked envelope. Inside was a photocopy. At the top, Hollingsville HOA Financial Report, Q2. Stuck to page 9 with a neon green sticky note, "You'll want to see page 9. The leaves weren't the only thing falling in Hollingsville, trust in the HOA was dropping fast. Pumpkins had appeared overnight on porches, their crooked smiles glowing softly as dusk set in. Wind skittered yellow maple leaves across cracked sidewalks. Franklin's porch light blinked on as Michael locked the gate behind them, both men walking in silence down the lane, jackets zipped against the growing chill. Their footsteps echoed in the quiet of early October, a season once known in Hollingsville for hayrides and cider. Now, it carried tension under the surface. "This town used to look out for each other," Franklin murmured, nodding to the Johnsons' darkened windows. Michael said nothing, but his mind churned. The slashed flag rope had rattled him. Not in its vandalism, but its message. Silent, surgical, meant to unsettle. The next morning, Michael stood at the grill in his backyard, flipping slices of scrapple onto a tray. The smell drew in neighbors one by one, Tom, Linda, and the Kowalskis. Dawn arrived last, whiskey trotting beside him, tail wagging. Haley was already there, fiddling with a tripod near the old maple. "I brought apple cider," Tom announced, placing a jug on the table like an offering. "Figured this crowd could use some fall spirit." Chairs scraped the grass as everyone settled in. Michael didn't make speeches, but the folder in his lap said enough. "Thanks for coming. I know this isn't easy." Dawn cleared his throat, pulling out a weathered folder. "Let's get to the meat. Maryland's been claiming a lot of areas are common ground. She's basing enforcement on those claims. She fined me for putting a bench under my own tree," Linda said. "It's been in my deed since 1998 that the yard's mine to manage." Dawn tapped the folder. "Exactly. I pulled the charter from '97. HOA boundaries were never revised legally. They can't enforce what they don't own." Murmurs rippled. Haley adjusted her camera slightly, catching expressions without interrupting. "Also," Dawn added, "ADA violations. Haley's footage of Mrs. Conway being denied a ramp, that's not just unethical. It's illegal." Haley nodded, pulling up a clip. The projector flickered against the side of the house, showing Marilyn walking away from a resident in a wheelchair, hand raised dismissively. "That's the kind of thing that sinks an HOA," Dawn said. "Documented disregard for accessibility." Linda clenched her paper cup. "I'm saying this at the next meeting. I've had enough." Tom rubbed his jaw. "I always figured rules kept things tidy. But this ain't tidy. This is mean." Michael handed him a copy of the open letter. "This goes up on the town board tomorrow. Signed statements, citations, contradictions in policy. It'll be public." Dawn leaned forward, voice low. "Once this spreads, the power shifts. But be ready, they won't go down quiet." That night, wind shook the gutters loose again. Michael was sealing an envelope when Franklin called from the porch. "Son, you might want to see this." The flagpole stood bare, its line dangling, cut clean, the nylon coiled on the steps. Franklin's roses had been trampled in muddy arcs. No note. No sound. Just a silent statement. One that said, "We're watching." Michael looked up at the dark street and back down at the torn petals. He didn't speak. He turned, went inside, and added one more item to the file folder already thick with warnings, bylaws, and now, something more dangerous. Marilyn's smile was all teeth, but the numbers in the HOA ledger didn't lie. It was the kind of October morning where the drizzle never quite turned into rain, but you still ended up damp no matter what. Gutters along Maple Street overflowed with copper-colored leaves. Michael sat at his kitchen table in his flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, eyes locked on the spreadsheet he'd printed the night before. Across from him, Don hunched over a mug of lukewarm coffee, red pen in hand. "So, this vendor, Apex Site Services," Michael said, pointing. "Shows up 6 times between April and September. Roughly $11,000 total. Labeled for grounds improvements." Don scribbled a circle around the entry. "Never seen them do a thing around here." "You?" "Not once." Haley, perched at the breakfast bar with her laptop open, looked up. "I cross-checked with the town registry last night. No Apex Site Services listed. Nothing in the contractor logs either." Michael tapped the page again, jaw tightening. "So where's the money going?" Franklin shuffled into the room, tying his robe. He glanced at the printouts, then at his son. "She doesn't know who she's messing with. You're your mother's son." Michael offered a faint smile. Mom would have had a cease and desist filed by now. Later that afternoon, the trio met Tom Briggs outside Rita's diner. Tom had brought a soggy manila envelope. "I used to do seasonal repair work for Apex," Tom said, handing over an old pay stub. "Company went under in 2018. Real Apex had 2 guys, a trailer, and a weed whacker. This one's a ghost." Michael examined the stub. Same logo, different EIN number than what appeared on the HOA ledger. "So someone's laundering through a defunct name," Don muttered. "Bold." A car honk drew their attention to the cul-de-sac, where a small cluster of residents gathered around Marilyn. She was giving what she called a neighborhood improvement tour, clipboard in hand, voice lilting with practiced cheer. "And right here," she announced, "we'll be installing a new bench for the children's stop area." A hand shot up. Mrs. Patel, holding a plastic grocery bag. "Didn't we already pay for that last year? My dues went up in April for public seating enhancement." Marilyn's smile froze. "Well, due to contractor scheduling, it's been rescheduled." Haley zoomed in with her phone from across the street. By Saturday, Michael's editorial, complete with side-by-side ledger excerpts and quotes from 3 residents, was printed on page A3 of the Hollingsville Herald beneath the headline. "Our HOA finds funding phantom projects?" Tom bought 3 copies. One for me, one for the diner wall, one for Marilyn's mailbox. The town began murmuring louder now. At the diner, conversations no longer paused when Marilyn entered. Instead, eyes followed her, curious and calculating. Even Margot, the waitress, poured her coffee a little slower, a little colder. Michael found himself looking through old photo albums that night, flipping past a snapshot of his late wife laughing in front of Town Hall, her hand resting on the very railing Marilyn now threatened to repaint. That memory lingered like perfume in an empty room. "Ghosts don't scare me," Michael muttered, placing the album down. "But fraud." His phone buzzed. Don forwarded a message. Subject, notice. Public hearing scheduled. Town Hall. October 27th. Be ready. Michael stared at the screen, then at the piles of paper on his desk. It was no longer about just a flag or a rose bed. Now, it was about the whole town. The town hall notice was printed on recycled paper, but it read like an earthquake. It showed up taped to the glass door of Rita's diner just after sunrise. A half-tilted rectangle of city-issue parchment, watermarked, impersonal, but magnetic all the same. Public hearing, October 27th, Town Hall, open to all. Agenda, community concerns regarding homeowners association governance. By 9 a.m., Michael counted at least 4 patrons reading it with their coffee in hand. Margot had already laminated a second copy and pinned it above the register. By noon, it was all anyone in Hollingsville could talk about, between bites of toast or whispers over sugar packets. In his den, Michael rewound Haley's video for the 5th time. "The rules only apply to us," opened with a quiet shot of Franklin saluting the flag. Then, cut to Marilyn inspecting someone's mailbox with a ruler, a slow zoom on contradictory signage outside HOA offices, jump cuts of irritated residents recounting infractions as mundane as mismatched wind chimes or pumpkins placed too early. The final frame, Haley's subtitle fading in under Franklin's voice, "We earned this land." Michael uploaded the file to every group chat and neighborhood forum he could. It took 6 minutes for the first like, then a flood. By late afternoon, it had 11,000 views. Dawn called it a digital stick of dynamite. Predictably, Marilyn fired back. An HOA-wide email titled "Clarification and Truth" hit inboxes around 5 p.m. Recent circulated videos contain inaccuracies and unverified claims. The HOA remains committed to fairness and order. "We urge residents to disregard such material and consult official minutes for accurate information." But even as she typed, her hands likely trembled. Franklin watched the chaos unfold from his porch, wrapped in his Air Force windbreaker. "She's rattled," he said, sipping lukewarm instant coffee. "But she'll double down." Haley stopped by that evening with a small orange USB in hand. "I want this on the mayor's desk," she said. Michael nodded and made the call. Dawn arranged the meeting. By the next morning, the USB was delivered directly to the mayor's assistant, along with a packet of backup documentation, including legal precedent and complaint forms. Meanwhile, Michael drafted talking points for neighbors who wanted to speak but felt nervous. Clear, short paragraphs. Bulletproof facts. He even helped an elderly couple from Chestnut Lane write theirs in 16-point font. At Franklin's house, Dawn worked with him on something else, a speech. Printed in all caps, in a size even Franklin's tired eyes could read. "You sure?" Dawn asked. Franklin nodded. "I didn't spend 4 decades defending this country to get quiet now." That night, Franklin practiced. Alone at first. Then, with Michael standing in the doorway, watching his father's hand tremble slightly as he reached the end. "You were there when we took the oath. Now we need to stand again." Outside, the leaves rustled over the cracked sidewalk. Plastic pumpkins grinned from porches. An inflatable which danced in someone's lawn, half deflated. Inside Rita's, the usual table grew louder. A few were already joking about whether the HOA Halloween potluck would be cancelled due to insufficiently spooky compliance. But at a corner booth by the window, Michael sat silently. Dawn joined him, sliding over a worn leather folder across the Formica table. "This one names names," Dawn said, voice low. "Vendor kickbacks. Overbilled lawn maintenance. Misuse of common fund allocations." Michael didn't ask how he got it. Didn't have to. His hand rested on the cover. "And it's signed," Dawn added. Outside, across Main Street, the town hall lights flickered on for the night. The storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. The folding chairs filled up fast, but the silence before the gavel was louder than any protest. Even before the doors opened at 6, people lined the steps of Hollingsville's town hall. Children in fleece jackets clutched parents' hands. Veterans arrived early, straightening lapel pins. The American flag rippled under floodlights. Above, a sky cleared by autumn winds watched in perfect stillness. Inside, the auditorium buzzed low with anticipation. The kind of hush that builds not from fear, but from something deeper. A readiness. Michael sat between Franklin and Dawn in the second row. Haley knelt near the projector, checking resolution for the 5th time. Franklin clutched a manila folder in both hands, pages trembling slightly as he reread them in his lap. Michael whispered to Dawn, "This time, we fight with words, not wars." The gavel cracked wood at exactly 6:30 p.m. The mayor's assistant welcomed everyone with brief formality, thanked residents for their civic engagement, and invited HOA President Marilyn Grant to speak first. Marilyn stepped up in a beige suit. Her usual clipped smile felt tighter tonight, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. She unfolded a piece of cardstock, cleared her throat, and began reading aloud a prepared success summary. She spoke of beautification, community compliance, pride, statistics that no one had heard before. Words floated, sterile, mechanical. Dawn stood slowly. Point of order. The assistant nodded. I'd like the floor to present evidence regarding financial mismanagement under this administration, specifically violations of governing documents and misuse of HOA accounts. Gasps rippled. Marilyn stammered. That's not on the. It is now, the assistant said flatly. Continue. Haley dimmed the lights. The projector clicked. 3 minutes. That's all it took. Selective enforcement. Fines levied on veterans. A disabled woman denied a ramp. Marilyn measuring bushes with a tape line, waving off questions. Residents whispering about mailbox colors. Footage ended with Franklin raising the flag, his posture stiff, unwavering. Silence stretched. Michael rose and read a letter from a neighbor named Thomas Baird, retired Coast Guard, fined twice for installing a small flagpole in his yard. They told me my pole wasn't aesthetically consistent, the letter read. My son died with that flag on his casket. Murmurs. Then a cough. Then nothing again. Franklin stood. Haley helped him to the aisle. He walked without a cane, just slow, deliberate steps. When he reached the front, he turned, eyes sweeping the crowd, neighbors, strangers, cameras. He opened the folder. His voice cracked once. But it didn't waver. The flag isn't decoration, he said. It's legacy. One line. Just that. And the room erupted. Not in noise. Not yet. But in breath. In leaning forward. In acknowledgement. Michael clicked to the next slide. Receipts. Mismatched invoices. The same vendor, Apex Site Services, charged 5 times across 3 months with no matching maintenance logs. One invoice approved on a date the HOA office was closed. Another without a signature. Don explained each document calmly, clearly. No accusation, just facts. According to Township Code, he concluded, these discrepancies qualify as cause for an audit. The mayor's assistant stood. Effective immediately, she said, voice crisp, HOA accounts are frozen pending audit. And we'll be reviewing all fines issued since 2019. Cheers now. No longer restrained. Clapping burst from the back rows, echoed by chairs scraping, people standing. An older man handed Franklin his cane, nodding without words. Reporters rushed forward, flashbulbs popping. Marilyn turned, hand shielding her face, and stumbled down the aisle. Someone opened the exit door for her, but the crowd didn't part. She pushed through anyway, white-knuckled, heels clicking across the lot, shutter lights chasing her into the dark. Haley stood quietly at the side, recording everything, not for scandal, but for memory. The town hall smelled faintly of coffee and fresh print. And for the first time in weeks, Franklin Reeves smiled. 3 weeks later, the sign came down, and a new one went up, carved by hand. The old HOA building, once sterile and cold, now stood adorned with American flags and autumn garlands. Wind whistled gently through the gutters, carrying the last of the golden leaves down the sidewalk. A group of neighbors gathered, bundled in scarves and jackets, watching as the final bolts were loosened from the plaque that once read Hollingsville Homeowners Association. In its place, a new wooden sign was raised. Letters carved deep, finished with linseed oil and reverence. Hollingsville Veterans Hall, for those who served and those who stood. Franklin stood close, both hands resting on a cane he no longer truly needed. Don Alvarez stood next to him, arms crossed, lips curled in a rare smile. Michael held the final screw in his hand, then gave it one last twist into the frame. Inside, the transformation was quiet but unmistakable. The long polished table where Marilyn once sat in judgment was gone, repurposed into a community table, already stacked with recipe flyers and handwritten notices for potlucks and food drives. Folding chairs lined the walls, but now each had a cushion. On the east wall, a gallery of service photos was hung, black and white, color, digital, all equal, all proud. Michael lifted a small frame and placed it in the center. Franklin in uniform, 1968. He didn't say a word. He just nodded, as if to his younger self. Behind them, children ran in and out of the doorway, clutching paper flags Haley had printed from her home. She stood by the doorframe, camera in hand, snapping photos and soaking in sunlight. On her phone, her video had passed 12,000 views that morning. She didn't care about the number, but she cared deeply about what it captured. She handed Michael a framed still. It was Franklin, standing in town hall, hand over heart, eyes forward. "I figured you'd want this," she said. He blinked and nodded, unable to speak for a second. Tom Briggs showed up late, carrying a tub of pancake batter and a half-broken griddle under one arm. "I say we bring back Sunday breakfasts," he grunted. "I make them with nutmeg." "Don't argue." No one did. As people settled in and laughter began to replace tension, Michael stepped outside alone. The sun was bright but the air was crisp. Across the front porch, the flagpole stood undisturbed. The HOA's threat, once printed in cold ink and folded in a mailbox, was long gone. He took out the flag, unfolded it carefully, and clipped it to the line. With slow hands, he raised it. No one objected. No fine arrived. No judgment came. Just the sound of the fabric lifting, catching light, rippling softly in the breeze. Inside, Haley's video montage now played faintly from a Bluetooth speaker. Dawn clinked coffee mugs with Tom. A toddler tripped over his own feet and burst into giggles. The building no longer felt like a courtroom. It felt like something lived in. Before locking up, Franklin leaned his cane against the old chair that used to be Marilyn's. He left it there, not as a sign of weakness, but as a monument to change. Michael was the last to leave that night. As he shut off the lights and pulled the door closed, he noticed a small white envelope left on the bench outside. No name on it. Just his. Inside was a simple note, typed in a clean serif font. "Thinking of running for city council?" He stared at it, then folded it once, slowly, and slid it into his jacket pocket. The breeze carried the faint scent of pumpkin and wood smoke. Above him, the flag swayed gently, catching the last gold rays of the November sun. And for the first time in a long time, Hollingsville felt whole again. The flag now waved without fanfare, but with meaning rooted deeper than words. Neighbors who once barely nodded now met around tables once meant for fines, not fellowship. When rules are used for good, communities thrive. When they're misused, they crumble. Perhaps it's never too late to join hands with neighbors, to speak up for what's right. Like a lantern left in the window through a long night, one act of courage can light the way home.